Welcome to Gunsmoke Theater. I'm Dennis Daly. Very few radio or television programs had such an impact on their medium that they changed everything. One of those shows was Gunsmoke. Yes, it ran 20 years on television, but the TV show was a child of the radio show, which itself ran nearly a decade. Sit back now for the next hour as we go back into the archives and play some of those great episodes of the show that changed everything, Gunsmoke. Thanks and hi again, everybody, and we certainly have our work cut out for us this year. For probably no show in the history of radio so changed things in its genre, but did so in such an interesting, evolutionary way than did Gunsmoke. One of the most startling things, and when you study Gunsmoke and look at those early attempts to get the show off the ground, was that Matt Dillon, a name whose part of the language was originally called Mark Dillon. In about 30 minutes, I'll have more to say about the way Gunsmoke was born and how eventually the producers, the writers, would convince the network to let the show have a chance. But first, let's hear that first audition from late spring of 1949, the story of Mark Dillon. And the actor who played the marshal was Rye Billsbury.
Gunsmoke. Gunsmoke, the story of the violence that moved westward with young America. The story of one man who moved with it, Mark Dillon, United States Marshal.
A man there lives on the western plains with a ton of fight and an ounce of brains, who herds the cows as he robs the trains and goes by the name of cowboy.
He was part of it, a singing saddle bum, a cowboy, a drifter. They all drifted here to Dodge City one time or another. It's the end of the track and the start of the wilderness, a dumping ground of odds and ends, beginnings, leftovers. It's a place to stop and take the kind of pleasure you need. It's a place to pass through. Sometimes it's a place to die. My part of it was a sun-charred shack, rent paid by the United States government, and a marshal's badge furnished free. I was at the window watching the heat plump itself with Kansas dust and roll in towards the town when the door opened.
Your name, Dillon? You're the United States Marshal?
She was about 50. Hat, poke bonnet, dress, gingham, shoes, beaded Indian moccasin.
I heard about you in Gouji. They said there was a steady marshal here. Been living for 6 months running.
They've been lying to you. 4 months.
They say you can break a man's heart at 50 yards. They say you and your gun's already done that.
What's on your mind?
I want you to saddle up and get down to Gouji.
Why?
My husband. My husband owns the White Buffalo. Roulette, music, drinks. They say the roulette wheel's crooked.
Look, ma'am, half the roulette wheels in the West are probably crooked.
Maybe. But in Gouji, they kill a man for running a crooked wheel.
Well, look, ma'am, I don't...
Abigail Contrarius, that's my name.
Yeah. Well, Mrs. Contrarius, you don't need a marshal. You need an honest husband.
That wheel's no more crooked than you are. Leastwise, from all I hear about you. If it was, I wouldn't take none of the money's won from it.
Oh, sure.
Don't shore me, Marshal. The money don't just mean money to me. It means books for Indian kids and writing stuff, slates and all.
Oh, missionary.
Huh, me, with a gambler and a philanderer and a toper for a husband. I teach Indian kids, that's all. Teach them to behave and a little learning, that's all.
That's good work, ma'am. These towns could use more people like you.
Never mind that. If I don't get help, those kids will go back to their wild ways and I'll have a dead husband. You coming? Or do I have to ride that mule some more?
Ride it back to Gouji. I'll be along.
Make it soon, Marshal. There'll be a convulsion down there if you don't.
It was night when the town of Gouji came out of the wilderness and beckoned to me like a painted, skinny hag. If Dodge City had a tougher sister, this was it. I rode up to the White Buffalo and started to tie my horse to a hitching post whittled to the shape of a Pawnee girl when... Suddenly, the gun in my back told me I wasn't alone.
You won't like it here, Marshal. Pretty as it is, you won't like it.
No?
No, and don't turn around, Marshal. I'm shy and I'm modest and I embarrass easy. Isn't that so, Harold? You see? Harold thinks it's so. Harold had his tongue clipped. Apaches.
Maybe it was too long.
Oh, now that's not a genteel thing to say to Harold, Marshal. He takes offense.
I'm new here. Back in Dodge City, the etiquette's a little more formal.
Then go back to Dodge. We're very happy here in Gaojai. Like little birds. You could spoil it.
I was invited. Special invitation.
Well, the party's over. Now, Harold, now!
Something lashed out across my skull. A bead of glass splintered my brain. From far, far away, I heard some words.
Like I said, Marshal, you won't like it in Gaojai.
I wanted to kill him, but I couldn't. I didn't know who he was. I hadn't seen his face. But I knew I'd never forget that voice and that crazy giggle. When I opened my eyes, I was in Gaojai's dirt. I picked myself up and waited till the town stopped its dizzy dance. On its third time round, I spotted a horse trough. I stuck my head in to get rid of the blood on my face. I finally pushed my bones through the swinging doors of the White Buffalo. It was the usual kind of place, like Mrs. Contuarius said. Roulette, music, drinks. I got halfway across the floor toward the bar. Then I saw her and heard her. Slender, hair molded black, and something profane and exquisite distilled into her features. She looked at me, and when she spoke, it was as if she hadn't quit singing.
Buenas noches, chico. Oh, a marshal. A marshal with a new scar and a muddy badge. You buy a drink, huh, Chico?
Here's $1. Buy yourself an egg. Where can I find the owner?
Over there by the poker table. The goatee and pompadour.
Thanks.
Hasta la vista, Marshal.
Yeah, I'll be seeing you. Your name, Contuarius?
Si. Oh, the marshal from Dodge City. Oh, you have the look of a large headache, senor.
Yeah, someone else besides you and your wife was expecting me.
Oh, muy mal bad.
It wasn't good.
So I see. But I'm glad you have come, senor marshal. Look around. You see my place? The White Buffalo, sole proprietor and owner, me, Rafael Ramon Jose Contuarias. Magnificent establishment, no?
Mm-hmm. Looks like your magnificent establishment takes plenty.
For weeks now, I am losing money on the roulette wheel. Still, people say it is crooked.
Oh?
Someone is swindling me, senor. This someone I swear I will kill dead unless you find him for me first. That is why my wife comes to you, asks you to come to Gaojai.
She had it a little different. She's afraid this someone might kill you first.
Como? Oh, see, that might happen. But not so long as he can swindle me. Why kill the chicken with the golden egg, senor?
Uh-huh. Well, let's have a look at this wheel of yours.
See. Follow me.
Well, red, number 12.
Who's your spinner?
Greg Hagen, base croupier in the territory.
Uh-huh. Suppose you let me look around myself.
As you wish, senor. You find that someone who is swindling my wheels, see?
I'll give it a try, Mr. Contuarius.
Bueno.
Contuarius left me alone. I watched the table for a while. Nothing happened. Wheel didn't look crooked, and if it was being swindled, it was done clever. Finally, I moved around near the croupier. Hagen.
Yeah?
See you a minute?
What for? Oh, Marshal. Yeah. Bill, take over for a minute. Sure. Okay, Marshal. What can I do for you?
This joint legitimate?
Why ask me? Contuarius.
I know, sole proprietor and owner. Rumor has it the wheel's rigged, is it?
Suppose it is.
Well, then, I could win. You could win, too. Maybe 25% of what I win, and Contuarius wouldn't know.
Keep talking.
We both got to live 50%.
Now get this. Contuarius is my friend.
Sorry, I made a mistake. No hard feelings.
Plenty hard feelings. I think I like it better back at the table. Look around yourself. Make up your own mind about the wheel.
So I did. Mostly I hung around the roulette table. As far as I could see, the wheel was giving the house and the customers an even break. Just about the time I started to walk away, two new players came up to the crowded table. One pasty face, handsome, and a weak chin sort of way. The other, a big, silent hulk of a man with a drooping lower lip. They didn't seem to be together or even know each other. On the next spin, the ball fell into 29, bounced out, rolled around 13. Finally, settled in 00. Just as it did, Pastyface reached out and put a $100 bill on 00. Greg Hagen, the croupier, looked up and spoke soft but fast.
Sorry, mister, you placed your bet after the ball settled. The house can't accept it.
I had that $100 down before you started to spin. Pay me off.
Sorry, mister, the house says you take back your money. Contuarius.
Pay me, brother, before I make brush out of this joint, and you first.
There is trouble, Greg?
Yeah, this man placed a bet after the ball dropped.
He's crazy. I had the bet down at plenty of time.
So sorry, senor. The croupier is always right. Take your bill from the table. And if you please, get out.
He did. Fast. Too fast. As he went, I started to remember his voice. I'd heard it before. It was the voice behind my back when I first hit town. And all of a sudden it made sense, and I knew I'd found out one way the Spaniard was getting rooked. Pastyface and the Hulk were a team. When Pastyface picked up the bill, there was a blue chip under it on 00, and the house paid off to the Hulk. All according to Hoyle, except for one thing. The Hulk hadn't placed any bets. It was a good stunt. There had to be more to it than that, so I gave Contuarius a nod and followed Pastyface as he left. I got out of the casino just in time to see him disappear around a corner. I took it easy. Polite and easy. And a bullet nubbed the dust at my feet. I ducked into the shadows and whipped out my guns. A flash had come from a narrow passageway between two buildings.
I'm in this alley, Marshal. Come on in and get me.
Wait right there, kid.
I'm waiting.
He was in there somewhere. In that long slab of night that was too black to see through. Somewhere in there. I put my back against the wall and slid into it.
Strike a match. I want to see your face when it happens to you.
Try me.
No, Marshal. You shoot first. You'll miss, you know that, Marshal. But I won't, because your gun flash will tell me where you are.
Real clever. And that was clever what you did back at the White Buffalo.
Honest, Injun? Now tell me about it.
You and your friend. That was Harold, huh? A giggler with a talent for pistol whipping.
Tell me some more about it.
You throw down a $100 bill with a blue chip underneath it after the ball drops. You get yourself thrown out. Harold collects 35 to 1.
Did Harold do that? Oh, Harold, did you do that?
And there he was, framed in the entrance of the alley. I was caught between them, Pastyface and the mute called Harold. The big guns in Harold's hands turned over and over. His face held all the evil in the world.
You all right, Harold? Take him!
He was shooting waist high along the wall. And he was getting close. There was only one thing to do, and I couldn't miss.
You got Harold, Marshal, but you made a mistake. Your gun flash gave you away.
When I opened my eyes, I was in a place I'd never been before. Kind of cottonwood clearing. I'd eased the wound in my shoulder, and from across a smoldering campfire, I saw her. The girl from the White Buffalo. The morning sun lighted up the features of a man at her feet. It was Senor Rafael Ramon Jose Contuarius. And the bullet hole in the middle of his forehead gave him an extra flourish. Now it was Senor Rafael Ramon Jose Contuarius deceased. And the pretty senorita was singing a love song.
Back to Gunsmoke in just a moment. Combining modern detective methods with secrets of the mysterious East, The Green Llama offers CBS listeners a new thrill now on Sundays. Once he has heard of a crime or an injustice, Jethro Dumont, a wealthy young American just returned from 10 years in Tibet, brings into play his quick wit and knowledge of illusion to thwart the evildoers. Join him Sunday as he continues his fight against crime on this side of the Pacific, wearing green, the color of Tibetan justice, aided by Tulku, his trusted lieutenant. The Green Llama is a feature presentation of most of these same CBS stations. Now back to Mark Dillon, United States Marshal, and Gunsmoke.
You have slept long, Chico, without dreams.
How do you know there were no dreams?
Because I saw Death give you a little piece of himself, and then ride away on a black pony.
Yeah, I'm lucky. Who are you? How'd you get here?
They call me Tomas. I brought you here. The wagon over there in the burrow. You are muy lucky, Chico. The bullet was for your heart, but it spent itself on your shoulder. It was not your time to die.
But it was Contuarius' time, huh?
Perhaps his grave has been empty too long.
And you knew him well?
See? I knew him.
Well enough to kill him.
I did not kill him. Senor Contuarius was my protector.
What did he protect you from? Himself?
I like your mouth better when it is gentle, Chico.
And who did kill him?
How would I know? He was there like that when we arrived.
Why'd you bring me here?
I like you, Chico. That's why I tell you. If you leave, go back to Dodge City. If you die, die in Dodge City. It is not good here for either one.
Why didn't Pasty Face finish the job?
Right after you were wounded, I came along. I persuaded him you were dead.
He persuades easy, huh?
He persuades easy. Poor Tamar. The shots were heard. People came. Senor Drew does not like attention.
Drew. Ah, his name's Drew. But why here? What'd you bring me here for?
I thought Conquarius could help you. After all, he was your friend.
How'd you know that?
I saw you talking together in the White Buffalo. But tonight, out of the darkness, Death found Conquarius.
Conquarius! Conquarius! Where is he? Where is he? Answer me, woman, or I'll horsewhip you within an inch of your life.
There, Senora.
Hello, Marshal. Enjoying yourself? Get up, Conquarius, get up.
He's dead, ma'am.
He shouldn't be lying there on the cold ground. I'll lift him into the cart.
I will help you, Senora.
If you so much as touch him, I'll kill you. Come along. Conquarius. Give me that blanket, Marshal. You won't need it.
Sure. Here, ma'am. You're pretty strong to lift him by yourself.
I've done it before. You're hurt, Marshal.
I'll be all right.
You can come too if you want to, Marshal. I'll take you back to town.
Yes, ma'am. I didn't think she'd make it, but she did. Somewhere on that long wagon ride back to town, she squeezed a tear onto her cheek. Just one tear, but for Mrs. Contuarius, there was a major emotion. The sun was doing its best to char the wood frame buildings when we hit Gaujai.
All right, Marshal. Get out of the wagon.
Why bring me back to Gaujai, just so I could pick my own gutter?
That door. That shack door right over there. Try it. Get up.
Oh, come on, Dillon. All you have to do is lift your arm and knock on the door.
Yeah? Well, Marshal. What's the offer this time? 150%? Hey, you're hurt. Come on in.
Thanks.
Who sent you here?
Mrs. Contuarius?
Oh. I better cut away that shirt.
Why'd she send me here, Greg?
Not neat, Marshal. Not neat at all.
Why here, Greg? You a doc?
Lie still. I'll get some things.
You haven't answered my question.
I do things with my hands, Marshal. Spin roulette wheels and extract bullets between spins.
You a doc?
Yeah, I'm a doc. Was. Had a shingle. Shiny one. And they said I couldn't have it anymore. They had a word for it. Malpractice. They said I did something... What are you looking at?
That roulette wheel on the table over there. What's the matter, Greg? Don't you get enough practice at the White Buffalo?
You want this wound fixed or not?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Say, Greg.
Yeah?
I once heard about a croupier clever enough to spin a wheel and drop a ball into any slot he wanted. Hit it about once out of 5 times. Not bad.
Once in 4 is better. What about it?
I could mention it to Mrs. Contuarius. Round up you and Drew and go back to Dodge City.
Drew?
Pasty-face guy. The guy who pulled the fast trick with the chip and the $100 bill last night.
I didn't know him. I refused the bet, didn't I?
Yeah, that's what doesn't fit.
I'd stop worrying about it if I were you, Marshal. I could keep this wound open and let it bleed.
On the other hand, you could take the bullet out.
Yeah, I could do that.
And I'd owe you something. I wouldn't have to remember you to Mrs. Contuarius.
It's like this, Marshal. First, I just wanted to tame the wheel. Then it got out of hand.
Tamar have anything to do with it getting out of hand?
What do you know about... I'm ready to take the bullet out, Marshal. You're going to keep what you know to yourself?
Take the bullet out. I'll bite my lip.
Yeah, do that, Marshal. It's a nice pose.
I bit my lip, but all I got was pain in my mouth. I didn't need that. There was enough pain. It was a pain that was painted in red, and it couldn't decide whether it was a flame or an icicle. When I woke up, Greg was talking to someone. It didn't take long to recognize the voice.
You should have let him die, Chico. You will only cause trouble.
He's got nothing on me. Only trouble I got is you. Every man in town. You couldn't even leave the marshal alone.
Ah, Mia, you're crazy. I found the marshal in the cottonwood clearing, like I told you. He was there when I came.
Yeah. Keeping your little rendezvous with Contuarius. I warned you, Tamar. I told you if I ever caught you with Contuarius again, I'd kill him, and I did.
I'm sorry I heard you say that, Greg.
Don't be sorry. Just leave town. I could have let you die, Marshal.
I'm going to take you, Greg. But first, I'm going to give you some advice.
Yeah?
Get rid of Tamar. One of her stories is bad, either the one she told you or the one she told me.
Don't listen to him, Chico.
She told me she brought me to the cottonwood clearing and persuaded Drew that I was dead. If that's true, then it follows that Drew's cutting your time the same as Contuarius was. You can't kill everybody Tamar takes up with.
The marshal talking through his wound, Tamar?
He's delirious. He's lying, Craig. I found him in the clearing, as I told you.
Well, Greg, who do you believe? Me or Tamar?
Get out, Marshal. Get out and leave town.
Can't, Greg, not yet. Gotta take you. Also, there's a personal matter to attend to.
I could have let you die, Marshal, remember?
Yeah. I'll testify at your trial.
Kill him, Greg. Kill him now.
Shut up! You know, Tamar, you've got too many friends.
It's a lie. Everything he says is a lie.
Maybe we'll stay one more night in Gaujai. Just one more night. That's all we'll need.
No good, Greg. I'll have to take you.
With your shooting arm and a sling, I don't think so.
I'll gamble on it, Greg. Want odds? I got up and left Greg's shack. He didn't try to stop me. One thing about Greg, he wasn't afraid of me or anybody else. I went back to the White Buffalo and waited. About an hour later, Mrs. Contuarius drove up. She was wearing black. She'd just come from her husband's funeral.
Lend me your good arm, Marshal. I don't want to rip this dress.
Yes, ma'am. There you are. Was it a nice funeral, ma'am?
Yes, Marshal. The kids behaved real nice.
You've done a good job on them, ma'am.
Thanks. Come in and have a drink, Marshal. You look peaked.
I followed her into the casino. In an hour, it began to fill up. I hid myself behind the stairs where I had a clear view of the roulette table and waited. About 8, Tamar walked through the door. Tamar in a dress of red. Tamar, buckled with silver. She strolled over to the table and put some chips on the black as Greg spun. There was no sign of recognition between them.
7 black, 7 pays, black pays. Place your bets.
On the next spin, Tamar won again. Then she lost. She doubled her bets and won more times than she lost. After a while, she stopped playing colors and switched to single numbers, 35 to 1. She kept on winning, but 1 out of 4, like Greg said. In an hour, there was roughly $20,000 stacked in front of her. Just before she bet number 13, I saw Greg fold his thumb under his palm and rub the side of his face.
13 black, 13 pays, black pays.
Lucky. You're very lucky tonight, Tamar.
Tonight, senora? But I'm always lucky at your tables, no?
Not as lucky as tonight. Sorry, men, this is a private table from now on. You can all move to the second wheel right over there.
Private table, senora?
Yes. Just you and this gentleman.
The man Abigail thumbed at over her shoulder was Mr. Drew in person. I put my good hand on my gun and prepared to finish my unfinished business. And I decided to wait for the piece to play itself out. I didn't know what Mrs. Contuarius had in mind, but this show was too good to spoil. Tamar, Greg, and Drew.
I don't know. This is my last spin.
That's all right, Tamar. All Mr. Drew wants is just 1 spin. Right, Mr. Drew?
Yeah, just 1 spin with the little lady.
But I...
Mr. Drew, huh?
Yeah.
But I do not feel like betting.
We'll spin once more.
Bueno. All of my chips on number 1.
Number 1, huh? Hey. Yeah, that's a good number. Number 1. I'll take 10,000 in gold on number 1.
Three red, 3 pays, red pays.
Why, you double-crossing...
No!
Greg didn't have a chance. The knife he tried to draw was hammered back by the bullets that tore through his hand and across his chest. Suddenly his face changed. He looked young and hurt, and ashamed of the blood that he couldn't hold back.
It'll make me happy if no one tries to follow us. Let's go, Tamar.
He held his guns like they were dogs on a leash that could snap easy. He waited for Tamar to scoop up the money. Then they backed out of the casino.
You let him get away, Marshal.
I don't think so, ma'am. He knows I'll come and get him, and he'll be waiting for me. He'll be wanting to finish me off if he can. And I'm going to give him his chance. I figured there was only one place to look, and there they were, resting easy in the cottonwood clearing.
I knew you'd have to come after me, Marshal. You're funnier than an actor. I saw one once in Dodge. You're funnier.
Maybe you laugh too easy, Drew. Like you kill too easy.
A marshal with a gun arm and a sling chasing a killer.
Go away, Marshal. Go away while there's still time.
I got nothing but time. I'll wait.
You're wrong, Marshal. You've got no time at all.
Yeah?
Chico. This I do not believe. It is impossible that someone could shoot faster than Senor Drew. And with your left hand. Oh, Chico, you are so very quick with your gun. I like that about a man.
Take it easy, Tamar. Come on, let's go.
Go? Not now, Marshal. There's time. Sit here. Sit here next to Tamar.
Like this?
See.
You know what I think?
Chico, don't talk now.
I think he had a great thing with Greg. He could put that ball on any number you bet on. Only that wasn't enough for you.
But it doesn't matter now, darling.
You thought you could double your profits by throwing in with Drew. Maybe you were going to double-cross him, too. I don't know.
Don't worry about it, Chico. The money is yours, too.
It belongs to Mrs. Contuarius. That's who's going to get it.
What? What are you talking about?
Take your choice. Come back with me to the jail in Gougai, or I'll turn you over to Mrs. Contuarius. I don't think she could stand having you alive.
You...
Come on. This is the first time I've ever held a gun on a woman.
Chico, surely you are playing with me.
You're an accessory to murder, Tamar.
We go away together, you and I, Mexico, New Orleans. Listen to me, Chico, you and I.
Let's go, Tamar.
Listen to me. There's plenty money, yours and mine. Listen to me, listen.
She put her arms around my neck and her lips close to my ear. And for a long time, long time, first in English, and in Spanish, then in Cherokee, then in a language I couldn't recognize, she whispered at me every foul name in the book. She was talented. She didn't repeat herself once. Tamar didn't understand that a marshal had a job to do, and that the job got done. Back to Dodge, I came across a cottonwood clearing I'd never noticed before. I rode down into it. A small animal scurried off a log and lost itself in the shadows. And I was alone. And for a time after that, for a long time after that, I thought about Tamar. He'd given her guitar, but I knew she wouldn't be singing much longer. The rest of the way home, the country was dust. It got inside of my mouth, and it stayed there.
From June of 1949, the first attempt to get Gunsmoke off the ground. Eventually, when it was accepted and it would start on CBS in 52, it would run for 9 years. And concurrently, from 55 to 75, with a different cast, it ran for 20 years on television. Here is how most historians say Gunsmoke got started. The man who was the driving force behind CBS for, well, as long as anybody can remember, Bill Paley, loved a lot of the detective shows. His favorite was Philip Marlowe. He thought it might be fun to see if that kind of approach could be adapted to a Western format, a hard-boiled sheriff, if you will, or U.S. Marshal. Well, the head of CBS on the West Coast, Harry Ackerman, got together with writers Mort Fine and David Friedkin, and they came up with the rudimentary idea of what Gunsmoke should be like. And that audition, with Rye Billsbury as Mark Dillon, was the first attempt to start Gunsmoke. There would be one more audition in 1949 with Howard Culver, whom you may remember from Straight Arrow. And you'll be hearing that audition the next time around. Believe it or not, after 1949, the project would lie on the shelf for 3 years until Norman Macdonald and John Meston resurrected it. Well, it was a great cast in both radio and on television, and one of the sterling aspects of Gunsmoke was the sound effects, sound patterns, if you will. They won all kinds of awards, and the last living member of the Gunsmoke ensemble is Ray Kemper, sound effects man par excellence, who even wrote some of the Gunsmoke episodes. I sat down and talked to Ray Kemper about just what it was like to do all that magnificent radio and work with all those magnificent people.
There was a camaraderie in radio between the cast and crew that you just didn't get in television. And we all loved it, now. So we were all really quite friendly. And I know one day I went across the street to have lunch, and I had been working on Fort Laramie, and Raymond Burr was there having lunch, and he said, "Hey, come on over." So I went over and sat down with him, and I was a skinny kid in those days, and I could eat anything, and Raymond Burr always fought weight. So I sat there, and I ordered a great big hamburger and snarfed that, and Raymond Burr was just eating very carefully, and I just ate that, and then I ordered a great big hot fudge sundae for dessert.
Oh, no.
And Raymond looked at me. I polished that off, and he kept looking at me through the whole time, and finally he said, if I had eaten what you just ate, I would have gained 10 pounds by the time I got to the door.
You know, and the funny thing is, listening to these shows today, having known that he would eventually become Perry Mason,
yeah,
it's hard to listen to some of them. It's like Alan Reed Sr.,
yeah,
who became Fred Flintstone.
Yes.
But he was Pasquale on Life with Luigi.
Yes.
And every time they needed an uncle with a foreign accent, there he was. And
he was great.
And at this time, he was not Fred Flintstone yet, so no one compared him to Fred Flintstone. But it's really interesting to see where these actors would end up,
yeah,
and then compare that work,
yeah,
to what they were doing earlier. Was it Howard Culver who was Straight Arrow?
That's correct. He was.
I remember the first time I heard that show, I'm going around for 3 days going, Straight Arrow!
Yeah.
How did you make the arrow fly and hit the target? Do you remember what you did for a sound effect?
We actually made up a little bow with the string on it, and we could twang that. And then we had a piece of wood or swish past the microphone. It was all a matter of timing. Right. One of us would do twang and the other guy would do the swish. And it worked very well, and all of that. That was a lot of fun doing those shows.
Doesn't matter how it looks, just so it sounds right.
Well, gunshots were a major problem because there was a master control, as you probably know, and then when you would shoot a gun in a studio, even if you were using a dynamic microphone and not a ribbon microphone, it would go out of that studio and go to the master control where there was a limiter, and that limiter would stop any sound going beyond a certain point. So the gunshot would hit that limiter, and immediately the limiter would clip out the middle part of the gunshot, and so you would hear just the beginning and the end.
And it would sound hollow. It would sound as if someone was hitting a cereal box sometimes.
It was a silly sound. It didn't sound like a gunshot at all. And that's where, when we started, they sent us out to do gunshots. Norm MacDonald, the producer and director of radio's Gunsmoke, said, we've got to do something about these gunshots. And so Tom Hanley and I went out to Bouquet Canyon, or as the locals called it, Bouquet Canyon, and with all kinds of guns, with live ammunition and blanks, and tried all of that. We went back to the studio, and it didn't sound good. It just sounded terrible. There was no reverberation that you associate with gunshots. We finally wound up going up to Bill Conrad's home in the Laurel Canyon area of the Hollywood Hills. He had a beautiful home there on 5 acres, and behind his home was what created a perfect amphitheater for sound, the audio. I took one listen to it, and I thought, this is great. And so Tommy and I were there with our guns, and Bill met us out there, and we called the police department and told them we were going to shoot a bunch of guns. Was that okay? And they said, just go around to the neighborhood and tell people what you're going to do, and that's fine. So we did. Then we went back to Bill's place, and we started shooting these guns. Well, we had big guns, 45s, 38s, 22s. I even had a shotgun. And we recorded all of those and went back to the studio and made tapes of all of the gunshots, and they were perfect.
Now, were they mastered on recording tape? You didn't take what was called a lathe cutter.
Mastered on...
Because Gunsmoke came along late enough.
Yeah.
If you get a good quality Gunsmoke, it sounds live.
Well, that's right. Our shots became the standard of the industry.
I remember one Gunsmoke where a person is shot from a great distance with a Sharps rifle, which apparently revolutionized long-range accuracy.
That's
and
correct.
I remember it was a wonderful copy of Gunsmoke. It was almost stereo. you could hear it whine past, and I thought, what a wonderful sound effect of that Sharps rifle.
Yeah.
Because you had to have that sense of depth, of distance, and it worked very well.
Well, some of the sound effects that we had to come up with, or any sound effects man had to come up with, were very challenging, and it was really interesting.
If you listen particularly to Gunsmoke, you will hear Matt talking to Miss Kitty and maybe Doc or Chester inside the tavern, and you'll hear the rinky-tink of the piano.
Yeah.
You'll hear the other people talking, the clinking of glasses. Then you'll hear Matt walk. You hear his spurs, his footsteps. You hear the swinging door open. Suddenly you hear a horse and buggy outside, people talking there, and a dog in the distance.
Yeah.
This must have been maddening to put that together.
Oh, it was kind of fun. I have to tell you that doing Gunsmoke was a joy. One of my favorite all-time shows to do. I worked it from 1952 until 1958 when I quit doing sound effects. But it was a lot of fun. There was great camaraderie, and it was the things we pulled on each other were just pitiful.
Ray Kemper, we mentioned William Conrad there, who, of course, would go on to be in Jake and the Fat Man and Cannon, and he was the very funny narrator on Rocky and Bullwinkle. It was an odd assignment for him. There were 3 other cast members. On radio, Georgia Ellis played Kitty.
That's right.
And she more or less slowly went into retirement after the show went off the air, didn't she? I didn't hear her very much.
I believe that's correct. I don't remember Georgia doing much beyond that. I think she and Tony Ellis were married at a time, but I believe they divorced.
And then the other 2 guys who kept showing up together in other shows, both of whom I would have loved to have talked to at length. I met Parley Bear, who played Chester, at one of the Pacific Pioneer Broadcasters meetings, but he was already in a wheelchair and had had a stroke, and I really wish I hadn't seen him. Parley Bear never sounded as if he was acting. Grew up in a circus family in Utah.
That's right.
And when you look at him later as, say, Mayor Stoner on Mayberry, and listen to that wise, wonderful, not too well-educated sidekick of Matt Dillon who calls the railroad the Santa Fe, you just fall in love with Chester Wesley Proudfoot. I mean,
let me tell you, he developed that character so perfectly, and he was the most natural actor I've ever known. He was just a marvelous person. I really loved Parley Bear. I'll tell you a little story. On a Gunsmoke show one time, Chester was supposed to come running in from the distance on a horse, galloping in and go and stop pull up and see when he gets to Matt and jump off the horse. Well, I was doing Chester's horse at that particular time, and I started that horse way off, and Chester Parley was way off microphone, and I started galloping in as he started coming in to the mic. And when we got to the microphone, I just went right on past the microphone and kept on going. Chester said, "Whoa," and this horse just kept galloping right on past the thing, fading away, and without batting an eye, Parley backed off the microphone and said, "I said, whoa, you gall dang crowbait, whoa." Amazing. Well, you know, his middle name on the show, apparently he ad-libbed that one day. He did.
Chester Proudfoot, and he had to, I don't know what the occasion was, but he said Wesley as his middle name.
Yeah, Matt Dillon, Bill Conrad constantly asked him every week on the show, "What's your last name, Chester? What's your last name? You've never told me." And finally one day he just blurted out Proudfoot. And it was that he just made it up on the spot.
We are talking to a man with a wealth of memories, Ray Kemper, one of the few remaining people who did sound effects in the golden days of radio, and was right there when one of the pioneering shows of radio was put together, the radio version of Gunsmoke. William Conrad was Matt Dillon, Georgia Ellis, Miss Kitty, and Parley Bear was Chester. And then there was Doc, played by the incredibly wonderful Howard McNear.
Such a marvelous actor and such a funny man. If you knew him away from the microphone, he was just so funny.
The funniest thing I ever heard that he said, and I'll have to clean it up, was during a rehearsal for Lux Radio Theater, he went to use the restroom. And Lux Radio Theater ran for 20 years with every Hollywood star on it. And McNear came out and said, "Do you know how many famous rear ends have sat in that room over the years?" But and John Meston wrote almost all the episodes. And there were several episodes where he actually let Chester or a Doc play a crucial part and star in it, and there were a couple in which Conrad didn't appear. I don't know whether that was because of illness or vacation or what.
That's correct. Tom Hanley wrote half a dozen of the Gunsmokes. John Meston, of course, wrote most of them. I wrote a few, but Tommy wrote quite a few, and he wrote some funny ones, but Meston was the writer and the creator. He and Norm Macdonald created the show. And it was, I thought, a marvelous program.
Gunsmoke revolutionized the concept of the Western.
It did.
Now, there were some juvenile shows that had a lot of texture. The Lone Ranger evolved into a show that both adults and children could like. Sergeant Preston of the Yukon was a very adult, juvenile show. But Gunsmoke was different.
It was.
And I think Gunsmoke is the grandfather of so much that happened, particularly in the early days of television, where at one time there were 17 Westerns on the air.
That's right. It was, the radio show was on for 9 years, as I recall. And it started, I believe, the first part of 1952. It might have been March or April of 52. I can't remember exactly. And ran for 9 years. And I thought it was a marvelous show.
Did the cast assume that when the show went to television, it would go with it? I don't want to read too much into it, but it was probably because they didn't think that a rather portly William Conrad would look good on a horse. But the cast must have been devastated. For those who don't know, they said, "We're taking the show to television. You're all fired. New cast."
Well, that was a real, very big hurt for those people. You know, I mean, here they created all these characters. Bill Conrad created Matt Dillon. Parley Bear created Chester. Doc, Howard McNear created Doc, and Georgia Ellis created Kitty. And it was really hurtful to hear from them. I know Norm Macdonald tried his best to get them all to go with the show to television, but you realize, of course, Bill Conrad had a weight problem, but at that time, he went on a diet and he trimmed down to about 165 pounds when he was being considered to go over and do the television show.
Must have looked very impressive at that weight, very commanding.
Yes, remind me to show you a magazine I've got showing Bill Conrad at that time. And at any rate, he was very hurt by that, and Norm tried his best. But powers that be at CBS said, "No, we've got this other guy, and we want him to do the show." Well, the other guy, of course, was James Arness, and he went on for 22 years doing Gunsmoke television, and he did a marvelous job. But
they're two different shows.
Yes,
you have to look at that nearly decade-long run on radio, and I can listen to those at night and close my eyes, and I can see Dodge City. Those characters felt like comfortable shoes after a while.
That's true. That's absolutely true. That was a wonderful, wonderful show. There's one thing about radio that I always thought was superior to television. People created their own images just by listening to the show. And it's like the little girl said to her mother one time when she heard for the first time a drama on radio, and she was fascinated, and she said, "Listen, Mommy, television without a picture."
Ray, how much rehearsal did they get on Gunsmoke, and how much advance warning were you given to come up with all the sound effects?
We usually got a script about 3 days ahead of time, 2 to 3 days ahead of time, and that gave us plenty of time to get things all put together and ready for the show.
Now, the cast would get there on Saturday, and you do what's called a desk read-through.
Yes.
You just sit there around the table.
That's the first time the cast would see the script.
Right. And then how many more rehearsals?
We'd do a read-through, and then we'd do a rough rehearsal, then we'd do a dress rehearsal, then we'd do the show.
And that was it?
That was it.
I like to think that the John Dahners and Harry Bartells and Frank Gerstels and Georgia Ellises and Virginia Greggs of the world were good enough that they knew how to do this with very few retakes on things.
Absolutely. That's very
And the
very
reason
true.
I say that is listening to live radio drama, the thousands of hours I've heard, I have heard almost no mistakes.
That's right. Those people were real professionals, no question about it, and they were so good at their profession. All of those people that you mentioned, every one of them, they were just great. Yeah, I guess you know, of course, that Bill Conrad was a fighter pilot in World War II.
Yes.
Yeah, and that always fascinated. I used to talk with him about that, and he told me about his experiences flying a P-39 Air Cobra. And that was interesting. I think he said he got in real trouble when he flew underneath the Golden Gate Bridge and did a loop and flew under it again.
I mentioned John Dahner.
Yes.
He was an artist with Disney at one time, I found out.
Yeah.
Dahner could play everything from a U.S. senator to the nastiest, most ill-educated person in the world.
He was. He was a he was a funny man. You should have seen, he used to do a boiling oatmeal bit that was just hysterical. It'd start with boiling water. All of this was vocal. It'd start with boiling water, and then it would get slower and slower as the oatmeal thickened. And I'll tell you, by the time he finished that, everybody was on the floor. And he was quite a fencer. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yes, he was a very, very fine fencer. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, he actually was in the Olympics once as a fencer.
Ray Kemper, you've really shed some light on Gunsmoke, which is my second favorite show after yours truly, Johnny Dollar, and we were able to talk about Bob Bailey.
Yeah.
You work with Bing Crosby and Rosemary Clooney. Tell us about that.
That was after I stopped doing sound effects. They wanted me to record and edit the Bing Crosby, Rosemary Clooney show. They did a show together on radio. And, of course, I strangely enough, never physically met Bing or Rosemary, but I feel like I knew them because I knew everything that they did musically.
Right, and you were the conduit between their performance and the audience. If it weren't for you sweetening it up, the show wouldn't have happened.
That's true. I edited their show, and it was a lot of fun to do that.
Ray, as far as I'm concerned, you're a national treasure. You have great memories. I know. I will tell everyone before going on the air, Ray said, I don't know whether I can remember all this stuff. No, you were there. You did it, and you have brought us some great imagery of a time that was very important to a lot of us.
Well, I'm happy to have done it, and thank you for asking me.
You know, I think I would have been remiss to have not asked Ray Kemper to share his thoughts about old-time radio, and particularly his association as a sound effects man and writer on Gunsmoke. And this time around, the history of Gunsmoke is what it's all about. And that's it for this time around. I'm Dennis Daly. Thanks for joining me on Gunsmoke Theater as we go back into the archives to play more of the episodes of the radio show that changed everything for the better. Gunsmoke, right here on YouTube.